beginning of this year, I mentioned in a video about the citadel of Namur that I would do a second video with some Burgundian trivia. I postponed making the video because there were still a couple of places in Namur that I wanted to check out. One of these places was the treasure of the cathedral. It has limited opening hours and usually during moments that were not very convenient for us. After several months we finally succeeded to raid the place and I've finally been able to finish the video. I am aware that this subject was somewhat covered by Bart van Loo in his latest book and podcasts. However, my research was already done and I did not want to go it to waste. In this video I'm going to concentrate on Charles de Bold's visit rather than Philip the Good, so it's more like an addition than a replacement of Bart van Loo's content anyway. This story will also concentrate more on the city than the citadel, with a couple of anecdotes and not much history of the county itself. That's interesting but also fairly long and boring for a YouTube video. Now I had to dig deep for all the necessary information and it could all be totally wrong. I'm not from Namur myself, I'm not a native French speaker and I'm more familiar with the citadel than the city itself. The books by Jules Borgnet were very helpful. He was a well-known Belgian archivist and historian of Namur. The information in this video is second-hand and I've not gone through the archives themselves. The city accounts are available online, but I found them a bit hard to read. Unfortunately, I couldn't get hold of more modern books either, and I don't have many myself, so some of the info is a bit outdated. Again, it's more of a work in progress than a finished product, and I may have to revise info in the future. Anyway, let's go. Charles de Bold stayed in Namur more than once, usually just a few days, for instance in 1454, 66, 68, 74 and 75. The visit in 1466 was when he met up with his father before they went on to their way to besiege Teneo. It was not just the two of them, obviously, they brought a large army. Charles's stay in October 1468 was again linked to the Liège Wars, but it was combined with another event. He arrived in the city as the new Duke of Burgundy and new Count of Namur. Let's see how that went. He arrives in the city in the morning of the 21st of October. He's not alone, he's accompanied by the French king Louis XI, and they're on their way to destroy Liège, together with the Burgundian army. This video will not cover the dramatic events at Péronne in France preceding this journey. To cut a long story short, King Louis has promised that he will accompany Charles to Liège and help him defeat rebellious Liégeois. The French king has brought several men with him. For starters, Jean, Duke of Bourbon. Jean is accompanied by his two brothers, Pierre de Bourbon, Lord of Beaujeu, who will later marry Anne, the daughter of King Louis, and will become Duke of Bourbon in 1488. Brother number 2 is Charles de Bourbon, Archbishop of Lyon. I'm going to tell you a bit of family history now, and I'm going to try not to lose my head here. The mother of these Bourbons is Agnes of Burgundy. Agnes is also the mother of Charles's deceased second wife, Isabel, so the Bourbon boys are Charles de Bold's former brothers-in-law. Agnes herself is the daughter of John the Fearless and sister of Philip the Good, Charles de Bold's father. This means as Agnes is the daughter of Charles de Bold's grandfather, as such she is his aunt, but she is also his former mother-in-law. Louis and the Bourbon brothers are all on their way to Liège to aid the Prince Bishop of Liège, Louis de Bourbon, who, you're not going to believe this, is the brother of Jean, Pierre, Charles and Isabel. Duke of Burgundy Charles de Bold is accompanied by his half-brother Anthony the Bastard of Burgundy and a large number of lords, knights and squires. I haven't found too many details about Charles de Bold's activities on his first day in Namur yet. I assume he makes a splendid entry and gets an official welcoming by the city. Maybe he gets some symbolical objects like the keys of the city or the staff of office, just like his grandson would receive in 1495. During Charles's arrival, something a little curious happens. According to Gallic in his Histoire de Namur, the wife of the bailiff of Namur gives birth to a son, around the time Duke Charles and King Louis arrive in the city. Apparently, the Duke and the King pay the mum a visit, and the Duke personally lifts the newborn. King Louis asks the Count of Perche to do this for him. The little boy is named Louis. The rest of the day is still a little murky to me. I think Charles and co have at least dinner and supper. Maybe there are some activities in or near the town hall, perhaps some signing of documents, I don't know. According to the record, Charles' lodgings are near the Gayet Gate in Saint-Rémy, a section of the old city near the river. The Gayet Gate disappeared in the 16th century, but it must have been around the beginning of the Rue de l'Ange. Apparently it was just a passageway under a private house and not a classical towered gatehouse. It was nicknamed the Lion's Gate because of the sculptures of lions that were on it. Charles possibly stays in the house of a knight named Jean d'Amery. At least the records of his stay in later years mention that this is the place he has stayed at before. Note that Jean d'Amery does not seem to have anything to do with Antoine Rollin, who is also known as the Lord of Emeries. Jean d'Amery is possibly the son of Henri d'Amery and Marguerite Olovigny. I find very little info about him or the rest of the family. Another side note, the old counts of Namur resided in the donjon on the hill where the current citadel is. Later on, they had another residence in the town centre in a palace called Hôtel de Sa Majesté, or the Palace of the Majesty, or also known as Hôtel du Roi, or Hotel of the King. This palace was built behind the Saint-Aubert church in the location of buildings belonging to the chapter of the church. It was rebuilt in 1464, and among others Philip the Handsome and Archdukes Albert and Isabella stayed there later on. I'm not sure why Charles didn't stay in this palace. Maybe it was not suitable at the time. 2 years before, in 1466, his father Philip had stayed in the Hôtel d'Albon, and Charles too had stayed in a house near the Gayet Gate. The location is now occupied by the former Palais de Justice or courthouse. Let's go back to 1466. I haven't found out where King Louis stayed. According to the Chronique Scandaleuse, Louis also goes on a pilgrimage to Halle during that time, but does not stay there, but immediately returns to Namur. Given the distance Namur-Halle, this seems a bit strange, but I have not found more info so far. Back to the agenda of Charles. The next day, on the 22nd of October, the Duke is collected at his hotel by 3 nuns who are accompanied by friars minor and members of the Order of the Holy Cross, all wearing their crosses and other ornaments. The whole company goes to the Saint-Aubert church where the Duke will pledge his oath as new Count of Namur, just like his predecessors did during their inauguration. We're going to have a look at the church itself later on, but now we'll just deal with the rituals. Note that I said the Saint-Aubert church, as in those days it was a collegiate church and not yet a cathedral. I have not found any details of Charles's inauguration, but maybe it was similar to that of Count Guillaume II more than 70 years before. Guillaume was led to the church in a procession just like Charles. There he attended Mass while kneeling on a prayer bench in the middle of the choir. When the Mass was finished, the Count went up to the altar, stretched his hands, touched the ciborium and the relics. On the altar there must also have been lying an old manuscript of the 4 Gospels on which he took his oath, like the counts before him had done. Now back to Charles. On the 22nd, Charles is not only partaking in the inauguration program in the Saint-Aubert Church, he also writes a number of letters dealing with the political situation and the upcoming assault on Liège. Among other things, he orders a number of his cities and other subjects to urgently send provisions, money and soldiers for his army. He probably has a bite to eat too, maybe a lavish dinner. That's something to check at some point. The next day, on the 23rd of October, Charles writes a letter to his mother, who is in Aire, now France, to update her on the Liège situation. Around 4 in the afternoon, he goes up to the castle. I guess he writes, he's not a tall man, and this way he looks bigger and more impressive, and it's a fairly steep road. I'm not sure what he's wearing, probably his armor and a lot of bling as usual. There in the grounds of the castle, he takes the oath again on a large stone in the presence of his following and a large number of officials from Namur. I haven't found details about the exact ceremony that day, but maybe it was the same as the one of the inauguration of Charles's grandson Philip the Handsome in 1495, or the installation of the governor Anton of Glim in 1528. This is described by Gilles Bournier in Promenade dans Namur. I will retell it in a fantasy version as if it were Charles the Bull. It's just a theory for the time being. Charles rides up to the castle with a large following, including his own men, officials from the city, people from the church and so on. It's 4 p.m. at the end of October, so it must have started to get a little dusky. People in the procession are carrying torches. The members of the chapter of the church come to meet him in the middle of the donjon before the Saint-Pierre church. As I already mentioned in an earlier video about the citadel, the donjon refers to the whole site of the old castle, including the defensive walls. They all go to the collegiate church of Saint-Pierre-au-Château, which was nearby. According to the 3D model of Namur in 1750, the church was about here. It was demolished in 1746 during the Austrian Succession War. Nothing is left apart from a few archaeological remnants, so we'll have to use our imagination. Here are some pictures of it on old maps and drawings of Namur to help you with that. Check the previous video about the citadel of Namur for a more general overview of the citadel. Anyway, let's get on with the ceremony. The first part of the ceremony takes place inside the church. Charles probably takes his oath at the main altar. After this, the chapter of the church brings the holy relics to the donjon and places them on the pierre bénite or holy stone that is located there. Thus concludes Bonje in his book, the holy stone seems to have been located inside the donjon but outside the church. How this stone looked is not known, except that it was flat. Maybe it was some kind of pierre de justice or justice stone. Bonje gives the example of such a stone in the Abbey of Saint-Gérard in Brogne, about 20 kilometers from Namur. Here it is on Google Maps. Maybe the Holy Stone of Namur was just a piece of flat rock, I don't know. It doesn't exist anymore anyway. Charles renews his oath on the relics placed on this stone. One of these relics, which were kept in the Saint-Pierre church and which may have been lying on the stone, was the bonnet of Saint Peter. It's a red velvet bonnet with embroidery and gold sequins. If it really was Saint Peter's is to be doubted. The bishop's hat probably dates from the 6th or 7th century. It was not on display during our visit of Namur, maybe it's too fragile, I don't know. I'm saying a lot of I don't know during this video, I'm aware of that. After Charles has finished with his oath, the nobles members of the échevin and other prominent figures do the same, but instead of promising to be a good leader like Charles, they promise to be good and loyal subjects. Afterwards or before Charles may have received some gifts like gold or wine. The 24th Charles leaves Namur together with his company and the French king. They ride on towards Valais, about which I already made a video. We are not leaving Namur yet. We are going to have a look at some medieval places and objects. Some of these were already in the city during the time of Charles the Bold. Here are two medieval towers in the city, of which I took a picture on another day. The belfry was originally part of the medieval wall. The tower was rebuilt in 1450 and restored in 1753. Another medieval tower is the late 14th century Maries Pilar Tower. It was part of the third wall of the city. Let's move on to the cathedral. The Saint-Aubin Cathedral is located a bit to the west of the Place d'Armes, the main square. It is to be noted that this is mostly not the exact building in which Charles the Bold took his oath. In 1740, the earlier church had suffered badly from inundations, and the chapter and the bishop decided to build a new cathedral. The old building was demolished in 1751. The first stone of the new cathedral in late Baroque style was placed on the 21st of June of the same year. This day was specifically chosen as it was the feast day of Saint-Aubin. After 16 years, the building of the new cathedral was finished, and 1772 it was inaugurated. Originally, the church was an 11th century collegiate church. It would only become a cathedral in 1559. However, one major medieval element is still there. The bell tower at the back dates from the 13th century, except the upper part, which dates from 1648. Now we enter the church. Under the main altar of the cathedral is a crypt with the tombs of 13 counts of Namur and 14 bishops. This crypt is, however, not generally open for visits as far as I know. In an old image from around 1600, one can see how the church looked originally on the outside. A bit of interesting trivia is the story of Don Juan of Austria, an illegitimate son of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. In 1578, Don Juan died of typhoid fever in his army camp in Bouge near Namur. As governor of the Spanish Netherlands, he was in the middle of a military campaign and had been, just like many of his soldiers, been sick for a while. He died on the 1st of October at the age of 31 and was brought to the Saint-Aubin Cathedral in Namur. He was embalmed and buried there until 1579, when he was brought to El Escorial in Spain to be buried with his father. According to what I read in a biography, the transportation of his corpse was done in an undignified manner. It seems Juan's heart and innards stayed in Namur, where a plaque at the back of the altar indicated the location of the urn behind it. I was not able to verify this in any way. During our visit, the interior of the cathedral was covered with scaffolding and the altar was not accessible. It's not good manners to fiddle with the altar anyway. I did find out a bit more details about what was in the niche containing the remains of Don Juan. The innards themselves were placed inside a copper urn. There was also a wooden basket reinforced with iron, which held his gauntlets, his baldric, his belt, a coat of arms made of greenish silk mixed with gold and silver, his silk stockings and his boots. After pondering a bit about the uselessness of war, we will enter the treasure or the trésor or the Musée diocésain, which contains a few wonderful objects. As we saw before, Charles the Bold and the previous counts of Namur took their oaths in the presence of the relics of both the Saint-Pierre Church and the Saint-Aubert Church. Some of these relics came from Count Guillaume II, who died in 1418. In his testament, he left a number of religious objects and precious jewels of his private chapel in the castle to the Saint-Pierre Church. The relics were then transferred to the Saint-Aubert Church when it was elevated to cathedral in 1559. Unfortunately, most of the precious objects of the Saint-Pierre Church had already been stolen or robbed of their silver by a perfidious sacristan by that time. One of these 53 relics and other religious objects that still remained was the bonnet of Saint-Pierre, which I already talked about and which was nowhere to be seen during our visit. Many objects on display in the museum come from other churches and abbeys. I'm not going to show them all, as they're not really part of today's story. The most spectacular and central piece of the museum has been in the Saint-Aubert Church in 1206. The crown reliquary contains 2 thorns of Christ's crown of thorns. These were originally kept at the Bucoleon Palace in Constantinople. In 1205, Henry of Flanders sent the thorns to his brother Philip I, Count of Namur, together with a number of other relics. Henry was Count of Flanders and Teneo and later became the second Latin Emperor of Constantinople. His brother Philip donated the objects to the Saint-Aubert Church in 1206. The crown did not come with the thorns and its history is not that clear. It's mentioned for the first time in an inventory of 1340. It was possibly commissioned by Philip from a Parisian goldsmith on the occasion of his marriage to Marie de France. The crown is made of 8 rectangular hinged plaques decorated with 8 florets, each placed in the middle of a plaque. It's a portable crown which can be demounted and stored away. It's decorated with sapphires, rubies, emeralds, topaz and amethysts, pearls and rosettes. The thorns were encased in capsules in the front and back floret. In 1889, the capsules were removed and placed in another recipient so they could be carried more easily during the Feast of the Holy Crown of Thorns in the cathedral. The box was probably made at the same time as the crown, so it could be transported safely. It's made from wood covered with leather and decorated with enamel roundels depicting all sorts of fantastic creatures. Analysis of the box was done in 2020. The wood was determined to come from the Seine-et-Meuse region, and the earliest date of the making of the box is after 1197. Now, an important question is, did Charles see or touch this crown? Well, he must have at least seen it. I've not found any details about this yet, but I did find some details about the inauguration of Maximilian and Mary of Burgundy in 1477, not even 10 years after the visit of Charles and in the year of his death. The Dean of Saint-Aubert to show them the crown and told them there were thorns in it from the crown of thorns of Jesus. After this, he took his hat off and bowed, and then reverently kissed the crown. According to Bart van Loo, the crown lay on a flat stone in the donjon during the inauguration. The crown was always part of the treasure of the Saint-Aubert Church, so maybe it was brought up to the flat stone for the second ceremony. Another object that Henry sent to his brother Philip were pieces of the true cross. These pieces are encased in a black wooden cross. The current container dates from the 16th and the 17th century, as the original was lost. This is another relic that may well have been present on the altar during Charles the Bold's oath, as it's an important relic. The skull of Saint Perpetua came from the Saint Pierre Church, so it's an object that could have been on the flat stone. In the Middle Ages, it was wrongly thought to have been a relic of Saint Peter, if I understand correctly. The case is new, but the skull is the original. Saint Blaise dates from the mid-13th century and was possibly made by a Parisian goldsmith. Originally, it represented Saint Nicaise. Count Guillaume II, or rather his widow Jeanne d'Harcourt, donated it to the Saint Pierre Church in 1418, and in the 16th century it moved to the Saint-Aubin Cathedral like the other relics. In 1645, a relic of Saint Blaise was inserted in a small chamber in the back of the statue. Saint Nicaise was transformed into Saint Blaise by adding a carding comb in his hand. This attribute was one of the instruments Blaise was tortured with. There were also a couple of other religious objects that were not relics but already present in Namur during the time of Charles the Bold's visit. The date and provenance of this little portable altar is unknown. It may date from the 11th century. It's made from wood, ivory, copper and jaspis. The scenes depict important moments in the life of Christ. The little altar is already mentioned in the cathedral's inventory of the year 1218. The enamel triptych was just like the statue of Saint Blaise in the private possession of Guillaume II, Count of Namur. It was probably made by a Parisian workshop around 1320 or 1330. After the Count's death, it also went to the Saint Pierre Church and then later to the new cathedral. And to end this video, I'm going to show a number of objects which we saw in the treasure and which are not really related to the visit of Charles the Bold. After the visit of the treasure, we paid a relatively short visit to the Museum of Old Arts. The main part of the museum is dedicated to the Trésor d'Ogny.